Welcome back to the Under Construction podcast, where we talk with the leaders behind the built environment. Today, I'm joined by Shandra Spicer. With over 25 years in the construction industry, she began her career by establishing and growing her own construction company into a market leader throughout Western New York. Following this success, she relocated to Los Angeles and began supporting nonprofit organizations alongside being an active member of the National Association of Black Women in Construction. So I'm looking forward to talking to her about the story of entering the industry and her career journey today. So let's get started. Shandra, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you today?
I am wonderful, and it's my absolute pleasure and honor to be here. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Amazing. Good, good. Well, I like to always kind of start by just getting a bit of an understanding is firstly, what really influenced your decision to get into the construction industry?
Uh, what originally influenced me was I had no clue what I was getting into. It was really out of necessity. And I share the story that I started straight out of high school and did not want to enter into university with debt. And so I decided to enter the workforce, but I worked for my father's company for about 18 months. And unfortunately, his business was another statistic. He was in the lead and asbestos abatement realm. And so he approached me and said, well, let's do this together. And at the time, I was very much so, team dad, and absolutely, I'll do this. But I thought that I was really going to be running the business end of things and not have to worry about the construction because I had a business management background. And so, really, what influenced me was necessity. My family was in a position that we needed income, and I was willing to step up and help my family and do whatever it took. And I really thought that it was going to be a temporary path for me. But sometimes necessity puts in front of our face what we're made for. So.
Absolutely. And, talk us through how founding that company really kind of shook itself out, right? Obviously, you're partnered with your father. How did you really go about kind of putting the business side of things and then learning the side of construction as well, like you mentioned?
So it was very interesting because it predates the time period where it was sexy to have a startup. In fact, it was almost embarrassing because, you know, it wasn't something that was really looked well upon. This was during a time period where it was really the trajectory that you go, you get your degree, and you work for a big company where it's notable and people, it's established. And so really it came about, I asked a lot of questions. So because I had a foundation and had worked, in that prior position, there were actually a lot of women within the industry, and I would say in the clerical, administrative, managerial role that I would call a lot, Olivia, to get questions to answers. And I would say a lot of the foundation was just day by day persistence. And I had to learn as I was going along. So it was a lot of fumbling, looking crazy, making a lot of mistakes. But that's the truth. I learned the hard way. I had to learn as I went.
Mm-hmm. And I think that curiosity that you mentioned is super important to highlight. Always asking those questions, learning kind of every different role, responsibility that comes out of this job site or the trailer, and kind of piecing it all together and getting that 360 understanding. At what point did you kind of start to feel a little bit more confident in what you were doing?
That is such an interesting question because even though I had to ask a lot of questions, I don't even know if it was a thought initially about confidence or lack thereof, because if I didn't know, I just didn't have enough pride to be embarrassed to ask a question. So I think if I really, really put thought into it, it probably was years down the road that confidence even became something that was in my sphere or in my orbit. And what I mean by that is probably about the time where I started hiring a lot of employees, project managers, superintendents, and in areas where I had less experience, like directly in the field, I think that's probably when I had to really bolster in confidence and because as a woman and as a young woman at the time, highly disregarded a lot or pushed off like little lady type stuff. And I would say it was probably about 5 to 7 years into my business that I had a cognition about my confidence. Like I know what I'm doing, and please be mindful of how this conversation is engaged with me because I do know this, I do know that, but I'm also willing to learn what I don't know.
Mhm. And how did you find that leadership with folks in different positions that you hadn't held, like you mentioned, in the field and things like that? How did you kind of adapt to leading individuals in those positions?
Well, there were a couple areas that I myself had to do some personal and professional development. And I think when it came to um, hiring, I had to trust that I was hiring people that knew what they were doing. And I made sure through the process that it would also be a mutually respectful um, relationship. And so within our office confines, I had this. I'm trying to think of the word culture, where the titles were always for external purposes, for the purposes of organization, so that people know who to reach and who to call when there is a particular issue that they want to talk about with a project. But within the confines or the internal walls of our office, titles were not necessarily a thing for me because we were all humans and we all brought something of value to the table. So, in part of that leadership, it was never a boss employee relationship. It was always a mutually respectful professional relationship because titles are only necessary simply for organization, but titles are not necessary for us to learn from one another and to respect one another and grow within an organization. And so when I had those different positions, it was really wonderful because um, oftentimes, especially given my age at the time, those people were older than me, but
Mhm.
always treated me with dignity and respect, and it was so easy in return. And we were able to learn a lot from one another, Olivia, literally because of that, because of the respect, the communication factor in the meetings. If they wanted me in the field to observe something directly, or it was absolutely no problem, and vice versa, they were willing to understand the role that I had and the responsibilities I had and how they coincided and how we really had to work well together.
Mhm. And I think you mentioned a great point there around culture. How much do you attribute the business's, short and long term success to that culture and that foundation of that?
I think our culture was everything. And what I mean by that is, as you know, in construction, it's a difficult business to build around a healthy culture because there's always time and pressure and a lot of money and high risk at stake. But I think within the company, I'm trying to build a culture that number one, I tried to make it where people enjoyed coming to the office every day and really enjoyed their work because we couldn't control the outside atmosphere, but we could absolutely do what we could to make sure that our environment was good internally. And we really tried to make a practice of, regardless of the different personalities, appreciating the talent and skills that everyone brought to the table. One of the things I used to tell people is like, look, I get it. In corporate world, we really want to like everyone. But that's not always going to happen. Everybody's not going to be our forte. We're not going to want to go have dinner with them afterwards. But you know what? That's great because we're not married to them. We don't have to live with them. But what we can do is cultivate respect and consideration. But look at the skill set they bring to the table. Look at the business acumen. Look at how, because of their skills, they make our job easier, more pleasant to do. And look at their excellence in what they do. And it was really interesting because I would tell you we had a lot of different quirky personalities, but the way we came together was so wonderful. And we were able to have so many touch points with the different types of clients we had. And there was always someone for everyone in our office. So I feel like we were able to be all things to all people because we were really diverse and our personality, our skill sets, and our approach just as individuals to the outside world. So I think that was great.
No, amazing. And, obviously the culture was, as you said, one of the greatest things to come out of the company and to be formed within the company. Was there a moment or moments maybe or a period of time that really tested you? And what did you learn from that personally?
Yes, there were a lot of times that tested, and I clearly recall one time we were going through a high growth period. But also during this high growth period, we were going through high turnover because high growth also creates high pressure. And so one of the side effects, it was really demoralizing for me. I kept asking myself, what am I doing wrong? What is the environment that is being created here that is not conducive to people wanting to stick around? And I was taking a lot of things personal. And it ended up being a high growth professional development period for myself because I had to extract my feelings out of the situation and I really had to step back and be objective. And there were some things that needed to improve in our onboarding, even our hiring practices and who we were hiring. Were we hiring just for skill, just for culture? What were we doing? And do an analysis there, but it also helps us to put some processes in place to avoid those things in the future. So it was I think as an entrepreneur, everything always feels personal because you put your heart and soul into this every day. But it was also a time period where I was able to step back and grow overall to learn how to be objective in my thinking and not take so many things personal so that basically a separation and understanding that the company has to be able to be an identity in of itself and separate beyond me so that it can be the best that it can be without me always inserting something that's not there. I hope that all makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think it's super interesting that that kind of realization came out of, a tough time with the business. And, sometimes tough times can lead to good things or good realizations that kind of improve the overall, business or you personally in your kind of role within the organization as well. And throughout, your career in leading the organization and growing the organization, Chandra, was there any advice that you got from mentors, from figures that you'd connected with that kind of has a lasting impact on you?
Yes, I mean, so much. And I do want to emphasize I've always reached out and developed great relationship with mentors. I don't care what stage of business you are in, mentors, 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 because you need that. But I'll never forget, I was having lunch, and I say have a variety of mentors. No, no monolithic mentors. You need different points of view. And it was a gentleman who was a major developer. And he looked at me and said, you know, Chandra, one of the biggest mistakes women make in construction is they try and think like a man. He said, never do that. He said, be who you are. There is no such thing as thinking like a man. Don't be a man, be who you are. And I felt like that one is one of the most valuable nuggets that was ever shared with me from a mentor. And it was because at the time there was this big, push in society about women and this tough business and how we have to be. And I really have always just wanted to be who I am. I didn't want to fit into any box or take on any character that was not true to me. Construction is what I love. It's what I do for my career, but it is not completely who I am. And so trying to be something that I was not was really causing a conflict for me. But I do feel like that was one of the most valuable pieces of advice that was ever shared with me, which was essentially be who you are, and you will attract the business that is meant for you.
Mhm. Amazing. And sometimes, it is simpler to be you, instead of maybe trying to be somebody else or, trying to impress, just be yourself. And, that's what's meant to be, right? And
Exactly.
obviously, you have been, a senior leader, you've hired folks, you've built teams. What would you say, individuals in your role really look for when promoting someone or hiring someone, for maybe those out there looking to get a job or looking to get a promotion?
So I'll say if you're a business that really wants to grow dynamically, I'll speak from that standpoint. You're looking for people that honestly are better than you in that role specifically, and has the attributes and strong points and characteristics that as a leader you may be lacking. Because from a leadership standpoint, it's really understanding that we want well-rounded organizations, and we can't do that if we're top heavy in one area, and we don't want everyone to be like us. For myself personally, I looked for people that were willing to tell me the truth, even if they were scared out of their mind that it was going to be displeasing to my ears, because I knew that their honesty was rooted in looking out for what was best for the organization and ultimately for me and them, because we want long term work. We want to be with organizations that are loyal to us and we can be loyal to them. I looked for people that made me feel like, oh my goodness, what do I not know? What do I need to go learn? What do I need to go find out? I like to be around people that are really smart. And I'm not talking about simply from academia. I'm looking for that emotional intelligence, the obviously the common sense in the field, but I'm looking for people that really just get it. And honestly, as a leader, I'm looking for someone that intimidates me. I'm looking for someone that I'm like, oh my goodness, they could take off in this world. And I say that because you want somebody that's going to really shine bright and come in and bring all that pizzazz with them. And so for me, those are the things I look for in leadership, in someone in those roles, someone that if I died the next day, I knew that organization could keep operating because it wasn't centered around me. There were dynamic people in their roles that could run that organization with or without me.
Mhm. No, amazing. And obviously, you entered the industry from, straight out of college, like you mentioned with your father. What would you, or what advice would you give somebody entering the industry today and wanting to kind of, make it happen?
The advice I would give is just I would be clear on what your desire is, because there's ebbs and flows as an entrepreneur, and it's not always pretty, and a lot of times it's lonely in the sense that when you go to take on roles that are not the norm, you're not going to have as many people that understand what you're going through or what your experiences are. And my advice would be find people you can trust and talk to. Uh, Learn as much as you can. Take advantage of every course, everything that comes along. Take it. And even the bad experiences, embrace those, because it really helps you grow the most. And I know people say that all the time, and you'll see all the motivational things on LinkedIn, but it truly is. The most difficult times causes you to bear down into your creativity and come up with solutions that you would never think of otherwise. So be clear on your desire and cultivate stick to itiveness. A
Mhm.
little persistence daily gets you a very, very long way.
Amazing. And, is there anything that you wish, I mean, we briefly talked about this, earlier, anything that you wish more women did realize about their own potential in the industry?
Yeah, I wish more women in coming into this would understand that our potential is limitless, and that it's it's one of those things where don't look at other women-owned businesses as your competition or the world. First of all, we're our own best competition, right? There's no one like you. So always understand the value that you as an individual bring to the table, your own unique perspective, your own unique experiences, and your own unique qualities that you bring to the table, and realize that there are a lot of us out here and there's room for more, and we welcome you, we want you, and find within your sphere other women that I like to use crazy terminology, jip and jive with, that you connect with, that can be a great support system, because we're out here and we're cheering you on. And don't give up. It's always remember this. I love that they say it's a man's world, but always remember women raise men. So it's our world too. So embrace it and enjoy it.
Amazing, absolutely. And kind of fast forwarding to today, we've talked about obviously you grew and built your own organization, and then I know that you've relocated to Los Angeles and kind of took a bit of a pivot with your career. Could you just talk us through, maybe why you did that and what you've been doing, more recently in California?
Yeah. So there were several reasons behind it. There was an opportunity that had come up for my husband's career, and I wanted to support him in that. But also, my health had taken a dip, and I needed to give some attention to that. My children were quickly, I had started my previous business before, it was my original baby before I had children, and they were growing up on me, and I was missing them. And the other, I think, strong factor was I was exhausted. I was exhausted and I didn't know how much. And I just needed some time to recenter and refocus. And so I've pivoted, and I'm still in the construction realm, but I've decided to go more of the CM OAR route and IDM services. And it's very strategic on my part, because now I do have some expertise, and I know what I know, and I know what I really enjoy out of this business. And I want to move forward in growing that out here. We're creating a strong branding presence, and really establishing ourselves out in LA. And the other thing is, I wanted to see how successful I could be in a different market. I know the territory where I was homegrown, but Olivia, this is a different challenge. And it's really exciting, and it's a confidence booster in the fact that, look, if I can do it there and I can do it here, I can do it anywhere. And I think that's the next iteration of really tapping into that S on the chest, so to speak, of that superwoman, and really teaching myself or learning myself all the things that are possible from within, as long as we put our minds to it.
No, amazing. And like you said, continuing to challenge yourself, but potentially down a different sort of path or pivoting that path. It's not something to be afraid of. It's something to definitely embrace and, follow that. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You tried it and you figured it out. But it sounds like things are going great, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's all a mindset, and that's the other part. I think in this next iteration of my career, and that's what I really want to encourage people. There used to be a time period that a lot of us were taught: you go to school for something and you find a job in that area, and that's it. 40, 50 years. No, we can do whatever we choose to do. We just have to have enough gumption within ourselves, enough audacity to say, you know what, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do what's right for me, and darn what the world thinks, because everybody has an opinion. The only thing that I wish more people will realize is you don't always need to share it. It's not always beneficial, but that's the truth. It's a mindset, and be okay with when you are ready to change your mind. It's okay to do it. So do
Um,
it.
No, amazing. Absolutely. And sometimes it's, that little push that people may need to go and do that and, push themselves, like you said. And obviously, the industry that we know, and I'm sure that you've known over the past 25 years, is evolving daily, right? Are there any skills that you think will matter most over the next 5 to 10 years as the industry does continue to evolve?
I do. I think the ability to connect and interact with humans is going to be one of the most necessary skills. As more technology gets implemented and more distance comes between us as human beings, the ability to communicate effectively and warmly and kindly, the ability to see the person behind the work, I think it's going to be just a tremendous skill to have, because we're losing that the more we integrate and separate, the more we go to just video calls and not interact, we're losing that human touch. But at the end of the day, the one thing that will never, ever, ever be replaceable is us, and the need to be able to interact with humans. And so I think being able to cultivate those skills, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, send an email, that's great. Pick up the phone, have a conversation, get to know people, because things can be misconstrued in tone. I think as construction continues to, the bigger the dollars, the more the risk, and we want to be able to mitigate that risk. That's going to be through relationship building. So, how do we mitigate risk and not get to litigation all the time? Because we're going to have to be able to see the person behind the project. And if we don't have those skills, those relatable skills, those communication skills, to be quite frank, skills that just care about other people, I think it's going to be a lost art. And we're going to have conversations in years to come say, remember when we used to get together for coffee and have networking events? But if we're able to keep that human touch, I think that's going to be one of the things that makes us shine and become spectacular and stand out.
Absolutely. Make sure we're not losing that alongside, taking what we can from the advancements in technology and things like that, and using it kind of, in unison and not instead of each other is super important.
Exactly. Exactly.
And obviously, you're a member of the, National Association of Black Women in Construction as well. Could you talk us through a little bit about, their vision, and what really they're kind of, shining a light on?
So their vision is really rooted in making space and having a place of belonging for Black women in construction. And although there are numerous organizations for women, and I'm, members of various ones, this one was specific for Black women because uh, each demographic of cultures and ethnicities, we have different burdens that we may encounter, and they're unique to our experiences and what we face. And so here in the United States, although, and I know it's coming up more and more in conversation, there has always been a type of classism, but it's been rooted in ethnic, uh, ethnicity based and color based. And so, women of color and Black women, we face a lot of disregard in our voice. We're mistreated a lot in the workplace. And NABWIC has created a space where we can show up as who we are, regardless of what our various hairstyles are, our vernacular of speech, or how, because we have different accents, we're from different areas, different dialects, etc. But also our experiences from just the personal space on from a family standpoint, our traditions and things like that that we understand. So it's a space where I don't have to show up and pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm extremely professional. I know my business and I know it well, but I don't have to indulge or um, pretend to be a personality that I'm normally not, and or overly jovial, because I may have um, a lot of weight on my shoulders. Like right now, I'm considered part of the sandwich generation, like so many. So, young adult children, I like to call them old adolescents, and then aging parents that may not have the best health, and then helping to support the household and being a dynamic household manager, and just many, many things. But NABWIC allows us to thrive, create space where we're able to make connections and networks, not just throughout the United States, but internationally. But we're also able to get an audience in front of decision makers that otherwise we're often left out of the conversation because we're not valued in the same right as others within this industry. And so NABWIC has just been a wonderful place for me personally as I continue to grow my firm and also be able to make connections with dynamic companies and corporations. And it's not just other small businesses. There are a lot of majority firms that really see the value in NABWIC and they're also members. And so it gives us an opportunity to meet with those decision makers like Turner Construction and DPR and Skanska and other major firms that really they care and they want diversity. They want the other piece um, as they grow their companies and recognizing on a global level that in order to be the best firms they need to be, they have to be representative of what the worldwide makeup is. And guess what? We're diverse. So they want to be diverse too in their building aspect and how they're taking on the challenge of building infrastructure for the future.
Yeah, amazing. And it's such an amazing vision. And I think, you mentioned that having that community and, being able to share ideas, visions, stories, and, have that kind of support from others is, a huge thing. And also from the bigger companies as well, that support and, shining a light on the vision is super important. And so, aside of everything that we've got going on in day-to-day lives, do you have any recommendations, books, podcasts, that really kind of help you switch off when work gets busy or keep you motivated?
Yeah, so I do. I have a few books. So one that I consider I call it my Bible of books, where I go back and read it over and over again, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and that one is part of the mindset that I talked about in terms of a lot of people they think and grow rich, they're thinking monetary only. And if that's the first thing that popped in your head about that book, I encourage you to go open it and read it because it is far beyond that. It is about being rich in your mindset, rich in your personal life, your health in all aspects. And so that's something that helps me keep persistent and daily and develop good habits. Right now, I'm also reading Simon Sinek's Why. His Start with Why. That's another one. And I am just a person that probably am reading about 5 books at a time. The other one is Your Subconscious Mind. I'm reading that one, a study of that by Joseph Murphy. And podcasts as of late, I'm listening to a lot of, I'll call them AI generated Napoleon Hill speeches and some of his original things, but also Myron Golden is a podcast that just, I feel like I can't get enough because it's really encouraging. And I love his podcast because it always reminds me that being different is good. There's only one of you. And if you're thinking like everyone else, then you're not living up to your potential. So I would say that some of the things that I'm very mindful of, even what I watch on TV and if I'm taking anything in on a radio, because there's a lot of demoralizing things. I will tell you what I do not partake in is the news. I
Yeah.
call it the bad news. There's nothing good on the news these days. And if there is something that I need to know from obviously a business standpoint, I keep up with what is necessary. But other than that, I make sure that anything that's going to make me sad or depressed that day, I, I'm I'm not going to partake of it.
Amazing. No, and I think that's great advice as well. And definitely some brilliant recommendations there that I'll be having a look at myself for sure. Well, but thank you so much, Chandra, for giving us a raw and honest, understanding of what it's like to build a business and then pivot as well. I think that's super important for people to hear. So if everyone, continues to listen, like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode. But thanks again.
Thank you so much.